All right, guys, welcome back to the channel, and thanks for dropping by. In this session, I'm going to give you guys an overview of the Stroke Studio. I'm going to start at the top and work my way all the way down to the bottom, and I'll try to sprinkle in a few tips and tricks along the way. This session is brought to you via a special request. Shout out to Elena. Thanks for the great idea for the video. I really appreciate it. I hope that you can get a lot out of it. On the same note, thanks to all of you new subscribers. I really appreciate all the positivity and encouragement in the comments recently. Um, it seems that FYA is really picking up steam. I hope that all of you will continue to come back around for future tutorials. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so the Stroke Studio, it's right up here, located just beneath the Color Studio. An exalted position. The Color Studio and the Stroke Studio are sort of the king and the queen of the studio kingdom, if you will. Most frequently used by far, meant to be used in conjunction with the drawing tools here. The pen tool, the pencil tool, the vector brush tool, and our shape drawing tools. I'll grab the pen tool here, I'll put it in line mode, and I'll draw out a line so we can explore our different line styles really quickly. Now there are four. We have no style, we have a round line style, and then if I want to adjust the width of that, it's very easy. I can just pull this slider out and adjust it that way, or I can also tap on the value with my pencil, input the value that way, and if the studio is not visible, I can slide up and down on this to increase or decrease the size, which is sometimes useful. I don't know if it's some form of ADD or something like that, or OCD, but I tend to want to use whole values, and I get slightly like mentally perturbed by decimal values and things like that. But anyhow, that's just me adding a little personality, peppering in some personality through this little tutorial here. The next line style that we have is the dashed line style. I was going to put this off. I had thought about it, but I think it's better to just try to address it right away so that you don't spend too much time. Um, you know, when I first picked up Affinity Designer years back, the dash stuff was a little bit of a head scratcher for me because I didn't understand exactly what I was doing. But let's go through it option by option, and you can sort of see and understand it that way if you've never used this before. The dashes, you can adjust the length of the dashes. If I want them to be long, I can increase that width, and I can even get them all the way down to where they're round, like circular. Okay. The next thing I can do, I'm just going to put that back at 1, is I can increase the gap between these, right? So there's that. Now, this is like a secondary dash option. I'll show you what it does. For example, it looks like I'm making the dashes longer, but actually, look what happens when I increase the secondary gap. It's kind of like there are two um, different dashes overlapping one another, and I can adjust their lengths. And then I can adjust this primary gap between the pairs, and then I can adjust the gap between the members of the pairs, right? Or the two dashes that are involved in each pair. So it's cool. You can really customize a wide variety of lines this way. And then the phase, so if I grab my node tool, you see the starting point is here and here. Well, with the phase option, I can sort of adjust where those dots disappear and appear along that curve. So there are often times when you get like an ugly sort of half curve situation like this, and you want to just sort of make it even. You can get rid of it that way and sort of adjust your line accordingly. So say you want like to be nice and even, you go here, and then I can pull that phase back a little bit until I can sort of get rid of it or get it to the place where I want it to be. So those are the dashed options. I hope that clears that situation up. I know when I first opened it as a total noob, I remember just thinking like, like, what is this? Like, how do I use this properly? Um, it just took a little bit of exploration. That's all. So there's that. Okay. Let's go back to the pen tool, draw ourselves out another line. Oops. Okay, cool. So the next option that we have is our textured line style. Now this is meant to be used in conjunction with our textured intensity brushes, which basically apply a textured image to the curve that we've drawn. It's important to note that when you apply one of these, the setting here, the width setting of the brush, you see it's 200 pixels on this one. It's going to override the width setting that was previously in place, right? So it's important to make that distinction. It's not going to give you the same value that you set in place. So it's often better to either edit the size of the brush before you draw the stroke with the brush, or just realize that you're going to have to adjust the size a little bit once you apply the textured intensity image. It also has to do here with, you can see here, there is a length to this image, right? So there are sizes to these images, and the brush's width will affect that as well. So um, that's for another tutorial. The sort of, I can get into that later. I'm actually thinking of starting a new segment on Tuesdays. I'm going to call it Textured Intensity Tuesdays or something like that. We're just going to sit down and make brushes. It's going to be great. Look for that next week. Anyhow, let's go back to our plain Jane line here. Now that we've got our line styles sort of sorted out and our width controller understood, let's go through all the cap, joint, and alignment options here. I'll start with the caps. We've got 3 cap types, all very useful. I'll zoom in a little bit. We've got our round cap, our butt cap, and our square cap. It adds a little square of color there at the end of the curve object. There are all sorts of situations where you might want to use these. Primarily, I use these to reduce the length of the line while I'm drawing. For example, say I'm drawing something out with my pencil tool here, and let's say I want to draw some sort of shape that sort of curls in on itself. So like something like this. A lot of times you'll get some situation where, for example, if I drew this with this with a round cap on the end of it, there'll be like some situation where there'll be an overlap or something like this. These options can help you quickly sort of get rid of those kinds of situations. And maybe there is a situation where for whatever reason, you don't want to snap, you don't want the snapping to come into play, and you just want the line to go ahead and go all the way through. You can use this option to sort of extend it a little bit. So that's rather nice. I'm sure there are loads of other technical reasons why you might want to employ those different cap types. But uh, the very simple sort of use cases I just showed you there, those are the ones that I use it for the most. Let's talk about the joint types. It's better to demonstrate those with the shape tool. I will grab a square here, and we'll just take a quick look at what's going on with this square. Now, you can see here that my corner joints are rounded, right? We can change that from a round type to a bevel type, and then a miter type joint, where we get those sharp joints. The alignment type basically shows how that stroke aligns along the curve object, right? So right now, this is the align to center. You can see that the stroke is centered along the perimeter of the curve object, whereas if I put it to align inside, it will align itself to the inside, completely to the inside of the curve object, and this one will align it completely to the outside of the curve object. Lots of different use cases for this kind of stuff. I'll show you one that I'm familiar with. For example, Um, like comic book call outs are a great example of this kind of thing. So let's make it something like this. Say I've got something like this going on. I want to reduce that width, something like, I don't know, 15 pixels. I'll convert it to curves. And then what I'll do is, you see here, I've got a miter type joint on this thing, and I've got these square caps. I can try to sharpen this, but with with this situation, you see, I'm trying to sharpen this end up here, but it's not really happening with this miter type or this miter limit situation. And I'll explain that really thoroughly in just a second. But basically, it increases the sharpness of the miter joints. But there are some weird things that happen there with that. What you can do is, a lot of times I find that some situation like this really helps, sharpen that situation. Maybe have it. I want to have it really, uh, you know, get down to a sharpened point, right? And for example, I've converted this object to curves, and you see here, this is my sort of this is the where the endpoints of the stroke meet, right? You can actually change this, and I'll show you how to do it just right now. This is kind of a tips and tricks number one, I guess. If you go down here to the point where you want it to break, and then you break it, right? I can go back, join it again. Okay, I can join it. Now, this is going to be this point here and this point here where the two ends of the stroke meet. And then what you can do is you can actually adjust the pressure uh, in really useful ways to get your speech balloon or whatever it is looking the way you want it. I find that it's a lot easier to deal with the sharpness of the points when you use the align to the inside. You can do it on the outside as well, but if you zoom in, you get that square, right? But if you do it on the inside, it gives you that really nice, super sharp point. Now, since we're on this topic, let's talk a little bit about the, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the miter limit and the miter joint type and some of the peculiarities that arise while working with that. If I go back and I jump into something like, actually, let's grab the pen tool and I will put it in pen mode, and I will just draw out like sort of a shark's fin type of shape. One finger press and hold, we can control this handle. Oops. Sorry, guys. Break it. Bring it down somewhere over here, and we get this nice little shark's fin shape. Okay. So you can see here, I've got the miter joint type enabled, and my miter limit's set to 2. I've got a nice sharp little joint on there, but check it out. Like, watch what happens when I start editing this with the node tool. I want it to get really shark-like, right? That's what I'm doing here. But even though I've got this enabled, for whatever reason, my miter is disappeared. It's gone. So in order to increase that, you just increase that value. Now, I don't know what the actual math on it is or the sort of the facts, but I can tell you what I have observed from experience is that the more acute this angle gets, the more you're going to want to increase that miter limit. It's going to disappear awfully fast. But if you have a sort of obtuse or a very wide angle, you can actually keep that value super low and you'll still get a nice sharpness out of it. So again, just brief review. When you go super acute like this with your angle here at this joint, just increase the limit to increase the sharpness. When you have it out like this, you can keep it rather low and it'll be fine. Now, it's important to note the last little note about the alignments that I wanted to give you is that these two options here, the align to the inside and align to the outside, they don't function properly if the shape is not closed. Notice how even though I have aligned to the outside selected, it is not aligned to the outside, it's aligned to center, and that is because the shape is not closed. As soon as I close that shape, it changes and it aligns it to the outside or the inside. So, yeah, you've got to have a closed shape in order for these two to function properly. Okay, cool. Now, moving right along. I hope you guys are enjoying things. Uh, the order. Okay, so for example, if I'm drawing with the pencil tool and I have a fill for the object, let's take a look at what happens if I reset to the default setting. Actually, I like the butt caps sometimes. That's the way I like to sort of draw. Uh, right now, I have this option where the stroke is drawn above the fill. So it looks like this. Oops, actually, let's reset the pressure curve. I'll tap, reset pressure. I'll actually increase this so we can see it very clearly to maybe 45. And then I'll just draw a shape, like a little circle. Notice how, I have the stroke aligned to the center, right, of the perimeter of the curve object, and you can see it sort of overlaps a section of the like in this area right here. You can see it. Oops, you can see it overlaps, right? Watch what happens when I change the order. I put it to the back. It's now as if the stroke is behind the fill of the object. I am not sure which one of these is enabled by default. I played with them a lot, so I think I might have set it to this, but I'm not exactly sure. Anyhow, these basically there are lots of different use cases for these options here. For example, and it also these options affect it. Check it out. My fill is above my stroke, but my stroke is placed on the inside. So what? If this is enabled and this is enabled, it's like, where's my stroke? Dude, where's my stroke? Well, it's behind. It's like this. And if this is completely outside, then it looks like you have this double wide stroke because the uh, the order is set differently. And then if I change it, it's it's not affected because of where the stroke lies along the perimeter of the curve object. But if I put it back to this, you know, you can get these situations that arise. It's very noticeable if you, for example, if you're drawing something like a curve object that overlaps itself. Um, this is where you can get really fun and interesting with it. If you're trying to draw weird things, like for example, if I try to draw something like this, let's do the strokes in front. We'll align to center. Let's check this out. I'll go wibble wobble and then back. So look at how it looks when I change it to this. The filled areas of the object are much closer to one another. I can change it to something like this. Oops. Oh, again, I forgot to close the object. That's another thing we can take advantage of in Affinity Designer and our new Affinity Designer. We can take advantage of our auto close option here. And now, one more time, I'll do that. Okay, it's closed up. Now let's take a look at the funkiness that ensues afterwards. Right? So it drastically changes the character of what's going on with the object. You can get really cool with your designs this way. Um, it can really affect, the whole appearance of the thing. Oops, forgot to select the object. Yeah, it can really drastically affect the way the thing appears. So it's good to know. It's good to know. All right. So let's now get into scale with object. Okay, guys, this is the one that's like, it's going to be, okay. If you're in the groove, like you've seen on the, I just got finished doing the Mr. Ogre sessions. If you're really in the groove with the pencil tool and you're really just cranking, a lot of times I totally forget to just turn this on while I'm drawing. You turn this on while you're drawing, and what happens is this. Like, let's say I have pressure on this line, or no. Let's say I'm going to just go ahead and put none and then set a curve, something like this. Okay. I'll draw out a, let's do 100 so it's nice and big. And then I draw out a line like this. Actually, let's put it like that. Okay, cool. Now, with this on, or with this off rather, if I duplicate this object and scale it and bring it down, check it out. Scale with object is off. So my 72.5 pixel width value stays in place. It's the same width, right? Oops. But if I turn it on, you can see there in the studio that my stroke width is scaling with the size of my object. That is, if I'm scaling aspect correct. Now, if you forget to do this, right, you want to use this option mostly, I think, as, most of the time when people are doing any kind of scaling, they're going to generally scale like large portions of an artwork, whereas like you're going to want everything to sort of stay relative to you're going to want your objects to stay relative to one another. If you decrease it without it turned on, you're going to get these giant stroke widths and you're going to have to go back in and readjust everything. Well, they have recently given us this great option here in the Transform Studio, the scale override options. And I talked about this a little bit in a couple of the Mr. Ogre returns videos that I just published. The scale override options sort of ensure that you can get that without having to remember to turn that on every single time. So if you just turn this on with your whatever your selection is, say it's a group of strokes, for example, I can select them all, put them in a group, or I can actually select the group and then I can choose to enable the scale override for that. And it will automatically, oops, sorry. Check it out. I'm adding one finger to constrain the proportion, right? I want it to scale aspect correct. So I'm doing this, oops. Yeah, there it is. Sorry, two fingers. I'm adding the two fingers and you'll notice that my width is not changing. Check it out. But with it off, and if I go to the Stroke Studio and I notice that these things are off, you can see that now my strokes are resizing, or not resizing rather. The width is staying the same, but the curves are getting smaller. So it's a little bit weird, right? Whereas earlier before, if I turned it on, it doesn't matter. They stay relative. Okay? So this is an important part of your line drawing arsenal, the scale override options. It can really save your butt if you're not, if you're not enabling this scale with object every time you draw a stroke. And trust me, once you get into the flow, you're going to forget to turn that thing on like many, many times. And so when you go to scale your artwork in the past, you would just be like, oh my gosh, like slapping yourself because, of course, you didn't turn it on and then your artwork looks like ridiculous because it didn't scale properly. So there's a really important thing to take note of. All right, we're almost done, guys. We're almost done. We're down here to the very bottom of our pressure window. I'm going to reset the pressure. Let's talk about it. make it real nice and clear. I'll grab the pen tool, draw out a line. Let's sculpt this line with the pressure curve editing window. So essentially, the ends of the lines here are represented here and here. You can just grab and hold these and drag them and move them around. These are sort of you can't move them away from the start. These are the start and ends. It's kind of the infinite loop ends and starts here. But you can drag on the line, tap on it to add a node, tap on the node to either delete the node or tap on it once more. You can just tap on it, and then the other option is reset pressure. Now, this can get tricky, this is where a few more tips and tricks might help you guys out a little bit. If I grab the pencil tool here and I go to pressure, I'll increase my, okay, 100 is actually fairly large, so this should be great. I'll just draw out something like some kind of, that is a funky pressure curve, guys. I mean, what do we do with it? Okay, there's no easy way to do this, guys. Not yet. There are quite a few of us who are harping on the guys over at Affinity to give us some sort of option for this. And there may be some sort of option that comes along for us in the near future for that. But for right now, we've got to use ingenuity and patience, the two of the greatest gifts of mankind. Yes, we could go in here and try to clean this up a little bit if you wanted to, for whatever reason. Say you're drawing something and it's just a little out of hand and editing it is a little bit annoying. What can you do? Okay, so I showed you earlier about deleting nodes, getting rid of them. There are other ways. A long time ago, I did a video for Affinity. Did you see that? Scale override. Beautiful. Anyway, I did a video. The original Mr. Ogre series. One of the things I showed people was this sort of method that I used to get around, having to edit these so often. And what I had in place was I had a system where I used my vector brush tool, right, with a solid pen. Now, a solid pen is different from a textured intensity brush. Like, for example, if I go here and I go to new solid brush, a new solid brush is completely different from a textured intensity brush and a textured image brush. New solid brushes they're not, I don't know how they're generated, but it appears to me that there is a sort of um, perhaps a vector object being generated along the curve, right? So in this particular instance, these solid brushes are basically a circle being generated and overlapped several thousands of times along the course or the path of the vector curve that's been drawn out. And they are done so at a particular size that we can set, and we can set the variance and the opacity and what have you. Now, solid pen with pressure. For example, this is a solid brush and I go in and I use it. And let's take a look at what happens when I draw this. Say that for this project, my main brush size is 24 pixels, and that's what I'm using for most of it. Oops, sorry, I'm going to put pressure on here. So I'm just drawing out my drawing, and maybe this is some sort of weird like techno rock with like, stuff on it. Okay, whatever it is. And I grab this line and I'm like, oh man, I want to edit this, make it a little bit cleaner. How do I do this? Well, the first thing I would do is I would say, take a look at this line, okay, and see what the overall sort of the overarching sort of path of this line is. It's a shark's fin, right? It goes in a little bit, it goes up, it goes down, it goes out, and then it tapers off. Now, check this out. If I go over here to my pen tool and I draw a line out, what I can do is I can reset this pressure, okay? Set my size to about 24. And then I can go in and I can set a very simplified version of that curve that I was just dealing with. Something like this, right? What you can do with that is you can go up here to your effects menu, go to styles. Okay, this is something else. Let's put a new category in place. I'll just add a category. I'll call this, um, you know, we'll call this, like for example, I'll call this project was like the techno rock. I'll just call this like the T-rock line styles. I tend to name these style groups based on my project rather than like, I don't know. Uh, because there is no, as it stands right now, there's no like one size fits all solution for this. It's got to be a project by project basis, unfortunately, at this moment. So I'll just call this T-Rock lines. Okay. Now, I'll select this line and I'll add style from selection. And you can see there that I've got a style. I've got it in list mode. I call it style 1. I'll just call this, I'll rename it. I usually rename it to whatever the shape of the newly created curve is. I'll call this one like shark's fin. And there we go. And so this is a solid brush, solid line style. It's telling me that it's a brush style, but you know it'll also work with this solid line style because the brush is a solid brush. So that's an instance where these two overlap. So now I can go back, find this curve, and then just apply this style, and it cleans it up. So if you've built a decent little style library, which is really easy to do, you can do it so fast. It's so fast, in fact, I'm going to show you right now how you can do it. Check it out. We're here, right? I'll go back. I'll select this line. I'll just edit it. Maybe I want something that goes like, maybe I want like a double taper, something like this. Then I've got the line selected. I just go back to the styles window, add style from selection. Maybe I want it to, oops, sorry about that. Maybe I want it to ramp up. Go back here, reset the pressure, ramp it up. There we go. And then I just add that to my style collection. And so a lot of times, once I've established a general, like sort of line weight parameters for the project, I'll go in and quickly create a couple of the styles that I think that I might want to use on that project. So then I can just go in if I'm working with my vector line drawing tools, and then rather than fiddling around with this stuff for a long time, which it does take a long time if you're working with something like this, yeah, you can apply these styles. I want to add though that there is no problem with this. In fact, uh, you can look at it as your humanity, you know, like the imperfection of it. Like it, it will present with more character than many other things that you'll sort of spend time, you know, doing. Like this line has a let's check it out. Has a good deal of character to it. It's actually not a terrible curve. It's super easy to edit that. But there may be instances where you want to do something like this, and maybe you'll, you know, if you are someone who is habitually, you know, working at a similar size or, you know, that has a lot to do with it as well, right? So like if this canvas was much larger, then these strokes would appear much smaller. Yeah. And then your styles, for example, if you make them at a small size, like 24 pixels, like I did just a moment ago, it's not going to be fun to use those styles on a much larger spread because you're going to have to always go back and increase the size of them. Best way to do it is on a project by project basis. Eventually, if you build up enough style libraries, you'll remember like, oh, okay, I was working on this size canvas last week and I had this style library in place. I'll just go grab that and we'll use it for this project. Keep all that stuff, export it. If you want to export your styles for later use, you just go up here, click export styles, and then later you can bring that style library into your project and it can save you a lot of time. Um, Let's talk a little bit about this stuff down here at the bottom, and then I'll close the video out by showing you guys a couple of cool things that you might not have known. Um, okay, so let's grab the pen tool. I'll reset this pressure. Okay, and then draw it a line. Let's make this one 100 again. Okay, so these options down here are basically the types of start and end objects that you can place on lines to create infographics and things like that. So for example, an origin and an arrow, right? So what you can do is here, you can link the sizes of these, or you can make them smaller or larger. So for example, if I want the origin to be super small and cartoony or something like that, and I can do that. And then I can also add the pressure curve to this. So I can get these nice, interesting sort of arrows that I can use in projects like, whoa, you know? And this is just a really great feature that helps you create things like infographics or charts, things like that. You can adjust all this stuff. Of course, everybody loves the Affinity Arrowhead. That's so cool. Yeah, you can scroll through like this. Super useful stuff here. This little option down here, it allows you to essentially like the arrow will stop. Oops, sorry, I want to put this back on the regular arrow. The arrow will stop. I like the triangle arrow. The arrow will stop at the end of the curve. You see how the tip is here at the end of the curve? Well, you can extend it beyond the end of the curve. I often like to use this version of it. I don't know why. There are several reasons why you might want to do it, but it gives you a little more length, right? To the actual stroke, it appears a little bit longer, and it also helps you, for example, if you want to maneuver, like maybe you want some kind of a like situation like this, it's easier to make that happen if you just extend the arrow head or the head and end caps just beyond the starting and stopping points of the curve. So there's that. And then if you're like, oh, I meant to do it the other way, rather than actually, you can reverse the curve, but you can also just switch the caps. And so that's useful too. So that's what that's about right there. Just reversing where the caps are, the positions of the caps. So yeah, there you go. That guys, that is the Stroke Studio. Now, there are a couple of cool things you can do. I'll just sort of close the video with a couple of neat things that you might want to play around with and have some fun with. I showed this in my now infamous day one hype video. That video has a lot of likes, but it also has a lot of dislikes on it. And I think people are just frustrated because they click it. And I didn't mean to bait people. I was just so excited, and yeah, I thought the title would make it clear, like this is a hype and a tease. Like it's not like anything, you know what I mean? But, I continuously get trounced in the comments about that video. Listen, all you guys who watch that video, I'm sorry that like, you know, um actually Kate over at Affinity just did a really great sort of tutorial on some of the possibilities that arise while using the command controller. I didn't go too deeply into it in that tease. I just showed you about this ability that you have to draw straight lines, right? Like if you lock in control, you can draw straight lines. Oops, I want to take all the end caps off. We'll go back to none. Sorry about that. Okay, and then I'll reset the pressure. Oops, looks like we've got a weird anomaly here with the pressure curve. Whoa, that was weird, right? Crazy. A little bit of a bug. Anyway, yeah, if I'm working with the pencil tool and you go just beyond it to lock it, right? I tend to I don't it feels weird for me to do that sometimes, so I just like I come out and then I tap it. You can do it that way too. But it's great because you can really use this to your advantage while drawing. It's a really cool feature. Also, let me turn off the stabilizer. Okay, one more time. And I'll turn the pressure off because actually you may have noticed that while I'm drawing this in this mode, the pressure doesn't apply. And that's okay. It's useful for drawing things like, you know, technical objects, cars, buildings. You can go into sculpt mode. That's when this really shines. In sculpt mode, say I wanted to draw some sort of, you know, robot, like an ATST or something like that. I can get in here and, oops, you've got to, every time you deselect the object and stop drawing, you're going to have to like reset the settings on it. But you can do stuff like this. So that's one thing you can do with the command controller. There's another cool thing you can do with the command controller that I like a lot, that I use this quite a bit. So for example, if I draw with the vector brush tool, which I'm often doing while I'm doing vector inking, I'll set it back to 100 and, or maybe I'll just set it to like something like 75. Enable pressure, no stabilizer. Say I'm drawing a line and I want to edit this. Well, a two-finger press and hold will allow you to select the previously drawn curve while you're working with the brush tool. That's something that is really useful to know. But now check this out. So this allows us to edit, right? But if I take my two fingers off, I don't have that anymore. I'm drawing. I'm doing something else. Oops. Sorry, guys. 1 second. Okay. So I select the previously drawn curve. I can do it with these two fingers, and then I go in and I lock the command button in place. Cool, right? Now I'm in edit mode. I'm not using the node tool, but I'm here and I'm editing and it's going really well. And I can even employ other gestures, right? As well, while that command key sort of locks me into edit mode. It's really useful. It's so fun to edit this way. You can do this with the pen tool as well, by the way. So for example, oops, let's draw a line out and then I'll edit it. So the edit modes are still there. I used to really love that you could just tap into edit mode with the line tool and stuff like that. But with the command controller, we've got a host of really comfortable new quality of life options where we can sort of edit on the fly without switching back and forth between tools. And then I can continue drawing, do whatever I want to do, and it's all good. So that's a cool thing that you can do with the command controller that you might not have realized. Of course, don't forget that, the command controller essentially is just, our command keys from our keyboards, but, on this mobile little island that we can move around, which is really cool. But, don't forget about things you can do with it. So, for example, if I have colors on the screen and I want to grab them while I'm working with my brush tool, just come in here, grab it, and paint. Super useful. Yeah. With the brush tool as well, you can draw straight lines, but again, pressure information is ignored, right? So it's really, I would say that this one, even though you can use it with the brush tool, the only difference is, for example, look at this. While drawing curves with the pencil tool, um, after I draw the curve, the line is automatically selected, which is, right? That's just how it goes. Check it out one more time. The line is automatically selected. When I'm drawing with the vector brush, it is not. So there, you know, you can, you know, try to play around with it and find out what makes you the most comfortable. I love working with the brush tool the most because it feels as though I'm really, drawing with I don't have to see the nodes and things like that after I get done drawing. Um, what else can I show you guys? Okay, here's a really important thing that you should know about. Check it out. With these tools, you can often set the pressure in advance. With the pen tool, let's see if we can do it. Yes, we can with the pencil tool. Yes, we can with the brush tool. Nope. And what's funny is that if the selected curve will be edited. The last curve that you have drawn will get, this will affect it, but it's weird because you're not editing it. You can't set it in advance. So that's important to know because what will happen invariably is that you'll go in and you'll draw something like this, and then you'll want to set the pressure here while you're drawing with the brush tool by habit because you just got finished using the pencil tool. And then you'll go and you'll mess up a stroke that you just drew. So it's really frustrating. So just remember, when you're working with the vector brush tool, you can't preset the pressure curve. Okay? There's that. With the shape tools, of course, you can preset the you can preset the curves. See, like right there, I just drew that. You can preset it. And again, tap, reset pressure, gives you all that. So yeah. Yeah, guys. Lastly, I just want to remind you guys, if it wasn't clear, the finger gestures are still here. Basically, I think people what they didn't understand before is that these finger gestures are essentially corresponding to these keys here. So they act the same exact way. It's just a different way of doing it. So what's cool about the controller, having the controller and the command controller and the gestures is that you can use them in conjunction with one another to work more comfortably. It's so much more comfortable to lock this and then do gestures than to try to hold this finger down and then do like a twister with your fingers to try to work. It's so much easier to just lock one of them in place and then do things that way. So don't forget about that. You can use that to great effect. Guys, it's been a long one, but I hope that this was useful to many of you out there. Uh, Thanks again for the suggestion, Elena. Thanks again, everybody, for subscribing, dropping by the channel. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, maybe someone who it might help. And yeah, you guys, take care of yourselves. Keep working hard. Stay positive. We'll see you in the next video. Cheers.